In Chapter 6, we will be discussing fats and other lipids. When we think about lipids, we look at them in different categories. They are fatty acids, triglycerides, phospholipids, and cholesterol. They usually do not dissolve in water and they're less dense than water. So some of the major functions of fat is they provide energy. They also maintain cell membranes and they insulate us against the cold and the heat. They cushion us if we get bumped and bruised. So they also help in absorbing the fat-soluble vitamins. Without them, when we try to ingest any type of fat-soluble vitamins such as vitamins A, D, E, and K, then you cannot absorb those vitamins if you don't have any healthy fats in your diet. They also contribute to rich flavor and a smooth texture and makes food appetizing. There are different types of fats, saturated and unsaturated. When we think of healthy fats, we think of unsaturated, and saturated fats are unhealthy. Those are the ones you want to avoid. An essential fatty acid, there are two types, omega-3 and omega-6, and we cannot get those made internally in the body. We have to get them through the diet. Hydrogenation is a process that is not healthy. What it does is takes an unsaturated fat and it actually adds more hydrogen atoms to it and makes it saturated. And that ends up being a chemical process that makes the fat even unhealthy. So if you see anything in a food label that says hydrogenated oil or partially hydrogenated oil, you should avoid that. Trans fats are another very unhealthy fat that's used in processed foods, and you really want to avoid that as much as you can. So hydrogenated and trans fats are very unhealthy fats. Triglycerides are composed of 3 fatty acids and glycerol. And these are things that we look at with regard to overall health. We check the triglyceride level in our blood to see what the lipid profile is. Cholesterol gets a bad name. Everybody thinks it's very, it's bad, but we do need some cholesterol. And we need it to make vitamin D and the different types of hormones such as estrogen and testosterone, and we need it for bile, which bile helps us breaking down food, specifically food that's of the fatty nature. There's been a change, obviously, since 1988 to 2010. There's been a huge increase in the amount of fat people eat a year. Really, it's about 33% of the caloric intake of the American diet. So we want to try and keep it between 20 and 35%. Closer to 20 would be better, and make sure that only 10% of the fat is coming from saturated fat and the rest is coming from the healthier varieties. When you want to think about planning your diets, think about food labels. Look at the total calories from fat. What is the total fat? What's the saturated fat? What's your cholesterol? What's the trans fat? Look for poly and mono unsaturated fats. Those are the better fats, but any of the saturated and trans fats you have to be careful with. If you're thinking about, well, why does it say total fat is 2 grams and you try to add up all the numbers, it doesn't work. There is a guideline that says anything that's less than 0.5 grams of a type of fat can be labeled as having 0. So sometimes the numbers are not perfect, but you can get a general idea. The problem with lipids is that anytime we have the bad form of them, it can affect our cardiovascular system, and you can develop diseases of the heart and the blood vessels. Most common are heart disease and stroke. 1 in 3 adult Americans have some form of cardiovascular disease. So atherosclerosis is the disease where fat starts building up in the plaques inside the artery. Once that plaque forms, something can irritate it, the lining of the artery, and it starts a process where these plaques start to form. They narrow the arteries and they can end up creating a clot or a thrombus, which if broken can travel to the heart, the brain, or the lungs, and that could be deadly. So when we think about the different type of lipoproteins, we think of high-density lipoproteins and low-density lipoproteins because they transport the fat or the lipids throughout the blood. And they're a major role in atherosclerosis development. If you don't have enough of the healthy or or the high density lipoproteins to get rid of the low density or unhealthy fats in the blood, then you can end up developing atherosclerosis. So again, what you want to think about when you're planning your diet is looking for foods that are, low in cholesterol and in saturated fats. You want to get your blood work checked regularly so that you can know what your profile is. As we talked about the different lipoproteins, HDL is your good cholesterol. When you get that number should be greater than 60 in your blood work, and that will protect you against heart disease. It helps to transport the cholesterol and bad fats away from the tissues, get it to the liver where it can be eliminated. With the low density, or LDL, this is your bad cholesterol. We want to keep that number less than 130, and if you have risk for heart disease, less than 100. So you need to check your blood work to find out, what is your lipid profile and where do you stand with risk for heart disease. So that is the beginning of Chapter 6 on fats, and we will continue in the next video on the remaining parts of the chapter.